right, well, welcome to Belief Trumps Talent television this morning. This is our first episode that we're shooting from lovely Vancouver, and we're very lucky to have with us a special guest and a friend of mine, Ryan Walter. I'd like to introduce Ryan right now, and just let you know that Ryan's background includes 17 years at NHL as a player and a coach. He was drafted in 1978 by the Washington Capitals, second overall. He was the youngest captain in the NHL at that time. 4 years later, traded to the Montreal Canadiens, spent 9 fantastic years there, won a Stanley Cup in 1986, finished his playing career with the Vancouver Canucks, and since then has coached internationally, has coached in the National Hockey League as well, and is a noted keynote speaker and leadership developer with his consultancy, Feeding the Hungry Spirit. Ryan, I know that summarizes perhaps that Cliff Notes version of your career and your accomplishments, but it's great to have you here today. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Scott. Great to be with you.
Okay, fantastic. Let me first just remind everybody that at Belief Trumps Talent, we help youth develop the confidence and mindset to be able to achieve their best results. And with that in mind, Ryan, we're going to reflect a little bit on your early career, about your early thinking about yourself as a professional athlete and beyond. And with that, I'd like to begin by asking you, can you describe to us, Ryan, and our listeners, the moment that you really began to dream as a young kid about playing in the NHL?
Yeah, it's a good question, Scott. And, I think you give me a chance to go back and look back a little bit. As a junior hockey player, I left home at 15. I'm a kid from the top of Burnaby, or top of Caribou Hill in Burnaby. So, I just grew up at the 8 rinks before there was an 8 rinks. How about that? And just loving hockey. Mom and Dad were always involved, and excuse me. And, I think at 15, leaving home to play junior hockey was a deciding moment that, I would take the next step. But I'm not sure I ever had, a dream at a young age that said I was going to be in the NHL. I do know this, that as I progressed, I certainly, you think of the 3 words that help you create high-performance culture: affirmation, confrontation, demonstration. I certainly had my talent affirmed. People would say, oh, you're going to be a good player. So, as I was heading into, you'll love this one, as I was heading into, the draft as a 19-year-old, I didn't even have an agent. I didn't have an agent until, just before halfway through my 19th season. And here I'm going to be drafted, potentially number 1, certainly number 2 in the world. So I think the dream solidified at that point, and I had a feel that as an 18, 19-year-old that I was going to be a player. But a significant thing happened. I know we'll get into it later. At 16, I broke a knee. I pretty much decimated my right knee. And the rehabilitation pain and process that it took to, get that knee back in shape probably gave me a feel that I could do this.
Right. Okay. So that's an early challenge. Okay. Remarkable. Okay. Fair enough. So, okay, good. Well, that leads us to our next question then, really, as we still spend some time with your teenage years as an athlete and in hockey. What do you think really came first for you, Ryan, as you began to answer the call and went and played junior at such a young age? Do you think your initial success was more due to talent or a belief in your abilities?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I love your theme. There's no doubt that, my talent developed as I spent more time focused on it. But I learned early on that a self-belief, and then, I sort of believe in the individual and the cultural. And you believe in your team that you can do it, but first you have to believe in yourself. And that deep down sort of, desire, I think it grows. I mean, I believed in certain parts of myself. I'll give you an example as there's nothing wrong with this, but, and growing up in Burnaby, the buddies I hung with, all great guys, we were fine to be average. we would get, C's and C minuses and C pluses at school. I started hanging around with a different crowd as I went to play junior hockey at 15. These are pretty highly motivated guys. And, it's interesting. I went from a C minus to a straight A average. I say to people all the time, what changed? It wasn't my talent that changed. It wasn't my intellect that changed. It was really that sense of, what I wanted to be and who I could be that changed. Mm-hmm. So I love where you're going. And we call it in the game of hockey, we call it the inner game. And when the inner game's on, the talent comes to the top.
Fantastic. That's a great recollection. A wonderful story. Thanks for sharing that. Like it was yesterday, I suppose, yes? I have another question here, connecting again your younger years, as an emerging athlete. Did you have a hockey hero or an athletic hero growing up, at 14, 15, 16? Was there someone that you really maybe wanted to become like? Even if you weren't aware of it, you thought about it?
We all did, and this is really going to show my age. When you start to think of, I think we at times adopt our dads or our mums' heroes, and we were a hockey family. My mom was an athlete, played basketball and other things, and my dad came from the prairies, loved hockey. So every Saturday, obviously, we'd watch Hockey Night in Canada. And I think, the simple names that came to the forefront were Gordie Howe and Bobby Orr and people like that. But, I remember my mom always liking Dave Keon. Now, there's a name from the past. But, and I love the way my dad would say, he's an honest player. He's a journeyman, but he's an honest player. I always thought that was, sort of a neat thing to be able to say about somebody or to have somebody say about you. The other little piece, that I love in the game of hockey, we often say amongst our peers, we'll look at a player and we'll say, he comes to play. Don't you love that one? He comes to play. And what that means is that, whether you're Wayne Gretzky or you're a journeyman player, you put it on the ice every night. You're prepared, you're ready, and you come to play. And so I would say that, those three names, probably a handful of others, were sort of the players that shaped. Bobby Clark, was somebody that I looked up to. Probably I looked up to him a lot until I played against him.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Great stuff. Yeah. No. Again, as I grew up in Montreal and grew up through the Stanley Cups in the '70s in Montreal, and actually watched some of those early Washington teams come into the Forum. I have some memories as a young kid about NHL expansion in those early teams and what it was like, in those days before the Oilers got going and things changed a little bit. But here's another question I wanted to ask you. This is, looking back in Washington and in Montreal, or maybe even after that, who do you consider to be the most outstanding teammate that you had, and what qualities did that person possess?
Yeah, teammate, that's a great question. I think there was a number of them, and they came in different shapes and different sizes and with different histories. One of my favorite friends and teammates is Mike Gartner. And, Mike went on to have an NHL, Hall of Fame career. But when we were teammates, he was, a guy that I respected, that I was close to. He was honest. He'd always, put the time in. Team was always important to him. But, we had some older guys that really shaped the way that we did team also. When I got to Washington, I was 20 years old. We had players like Dennis Hextall and, we used to call him Dad, but, Jerry Meehan and players like that that really shaped, Bugsy Watson, that were about team. And they were at the end of their career. They were, 35, 36 years old, but they really took, I think of a guy like Guy Chiron, who was my first captain, really took me under their wing and helped me understand what it was like to be a team player.
Well, so it's safe to say you had some excellent mentors there, once you got into the league. And I think that's something that is lacking today for 18, 19-year-old kids, to really have people, to mentor them and show them the way. So thanks for pointing that out. Another question with regard to your captaincy at such a young age, what do you think was different about you, and what did you demonstrate early on in your pro career that, led the Capitals to choosing you as the NHL's youngest captain?
Well, at the time, I often wondered that too, looking back. At the time, I think it was, that I was one of the top players, one of the top young players, but I think it was also just a raw passion, and I cared about the Caps, in those days I had, a number of, I'm going to say this carefully, but I had lots of PIMs. If a guy was to go after one of my teammates, whether he was big or small, I'd go after him. So I think there was a passion to, be a Cap, to take care of my teammates, to play for them. And that was, I was also not afraid to sort of speak up. And at times that got me in trouble, Scott, but
yeah,
I think it's a quality, if you've got stuff on your mind and you never say it, it's hard for people to know what you're passionate about, and I think sometimes even as leaders, as young leaders, you can't be afraid to speak your mind, and then if you mess it up, you learn from that. You speak your mind again.
Well, it's safe to say from those penalty minutes, and I saw the stats from the early years as well, that, people that you played with probably felt that you had their back, didn't they? Yeah, I mean, you stood up for people, and you were all over the stat sheet, it looked like.
That's a good saying, that I've got your back, and I like that. And I think, it was meaningful when, in those days, in the late 70s, because, when you went into Philadelphia, there was a number of times in Philly over those 4 years that I played for the Capitals where, for whatever reason, I'm not sure they were picking on us or if they picked on everybody, but, we would have even a bench clearing brawl. And those are not fun times. But they were times that you had to rely on each other. And, I would always want to be a player that was reliable in those situations.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's great. We've covered a lot of the, I think, the intangibles and the qualities that you had and that you saw in other people that were emerging as significant, athletes and role models. Strong character, coming to play, having the inner game in check, which is certainly at Believe Trump's Talent what we believe in helping youth with, is getting our own affirmations and our own personal conversations, pointing us in the right direction. But let's now focus and turn it to a low point, in terms of where you demonstrated resilience. And I guess the question I'd like to ask you is, what was the low point of your hockey career, and whether it was in junior or in the NHL, maybe there's one or two, and how did you use it as fuel to improve and overcome?
Well, as I was looking at your questions before we jumped on air, I thought, boy, this is a real important one. And, the low point for me is, certainly was 1986. I think what people forget is that, I ended up breaking my ankle with three games to go in that season. So I was really watching my team win without me. And I think at any point, that's a low point. And I think for the first 12 or 13 days, I certainly had a pity party. I call it a pity party. Sure. Focused on poor me. I can't believe this happened to me. It's sort of, questioning God, how could you let this? And then, I sort of, I guess in my terms, in writing the book Hungry, I decided to get hungry. And I said, okay, every time that my team practices or plays, I'll work out. And during those workouts, I was able to stay in good enough shape that when the doctor came to me before game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs and said, do you want to try this ankle? I was able to say absolutely. So, I think that was a low point for me because, I think what's hard in life is when your team that you've been on wins without you. And these are
Fair enough. Hard to have perspective, about that. Even if it was still the last Canadian team, I should recall, that has won the Stanley Cup. If I'm not corrected, 1986. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Totally.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
I'm going to mess you up here, Scott. I'm going to have to plug in my computer, so you might have to edit this piece.
Okay.
But my wife Jenny's going to help me plug in my computer. I should have done that before.
That's okay. No problem.
Otherwise, we'll go black, and that's going to black is not good.
Yeah, that's right. No, absolutely not. So, no, I think that it's important to point out to folks that, I think of a guy like Sean Livingston right now in the NBA, who just secured a long-term deal with another team, with the Golden State Warriors. Sean Livingston, as a 20-year-old, completely blew his knee out. As a rookie, back when they could draft out of high school, and for whatever reason, he had a catastrophic injury. And he's 5-6 years later, he's come back and he's secured himself a great career as a role player, and he's fantastic, and he's healed. What a journey! I can only imagine what it's like to come back from significant injuries and surgeries and whatnot. You clearly did that, but I just marvel about that persistence, because people give up, don't they? I mean, and talk a little bit about that in terms of what you've seen from your own kids and some of the people you work with.
Part of believing is to muster the hope that you can come back and to not give up. And, I'm reading a great book right now called The Obstacle is the Way. And I think, we have choices when we hit obstacles. We can, certainly say, boy, I can't believe this happened to me, and get stuck. Or we can, have a new perspective and actually look for the gift in the obstacle. And I think many times that the resilience that you develop in going through injuries or coming back from injuries is a great, skill that you use throughout your career.
And in life thereafter, right? Because there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. And we all know how we can feel when things are going well, but it's really how we are when things aren't going so well, isn't it, Ryan? In terms of that shapes our character and tells us, explains to the world who we are. So one more question. I understand, I see you've got one son playing professional hockey right now. He's had an excellent career. He's playing over in Europe, I believe. And you've got, other boys involved in high-level hockey at the moment, it seems. So you're passing the torch for sure to others. What would you say about younger athletes today in terms of the challenges that they face to discover their true potential? What's in the way of them today with respect to maybe time or distraction or belief? What have you seen from the bleachers and from your own kids' experiences?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things, Scott, are really important. The first is that if you're going to have a dream, it has to be your dream. And I think what we see, and there's nothing new in this. I think this has been throughout history, is that sometimes in the game of hockey it can be mom's dream or dad's dream,
right, and
not the kid's dream. And at the end of the day, the 10,000-hour rule applies. If you're going to be a professional, you're going to be the best that you can be in the world, amongst the best in the world, you have to put in the time and love it. And, you can't just love playing. You have to love practicing. You have to love, lifting weights. You have to love, that team camaraderie around, running as hard as you can. So I think that's, for me, the key is that, you started off with, what was your dream? I think the dream has to be yours. I think secondly is that there's going to be very difficult times along the way. For me, the defining moment in my junior career was at 16 when I busted my knee, and the doctor did a 5-hour operation, pretty much said I wasn't going to skate again. And I think that's the second most important thing is, who do you listen to? Because a lot of people are going to tell us, you and I and others and our kids, you're not good enough, or there's no way you're going to make it, or, you're not a very talented kid, or your skating is no good, or, there's going to be lots of negative voices. And the amazing thing about professional sport is that I think it really develops that inner game, and I guess what you and I would call the inner voice. So who do you listen to is a critical second question. And then I think for me, the third, piece is that, at the end of the day, you get what you apply energy to.
Mm-hmm.
And so how much energy will you apply to being the best in the world? Nothing wrong with having girlfriends or boyfriends or, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But really what we're saying is how much time will you apply and how much energy will you apply at being the best in the world? And if you're not, sort of wanting to, share most of that energy in one direction, then you'll never be the best that you can be. So for me, it's those three pieces. It's the dream, it's having the vision, it's the inner voice, who are you going to listen to? And then at the end of the day, it's the energy. It's like, what energy are you going to apply to you? And it could be you and I talking about business. It could be us talking about hockey. But, as a teenager, I was able to stay pretty focused on, trying to be the best that I could be. And, fortunately for me, it worked out.
Yeah. Fantastic. Ryan, it's just great to spend this time with you today. Really meaningful for people in business, certainly for youth athletes. Your message is crystal clear. It's just, thanks so much for spending some time with BTT TV this morning. And we wish you a fantastic day, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it, and I look forward to our next time.
You betcha. Take care.